something?
Yeah, let's try the volume now. Is that coming through well?
It's a little bit better. JJ, how about you?
What does this sound like? You guys in the
You guys are both still kind of quiet. I've got it up as far as I can go in the room. Amy, can you try again?
So we should just project, speak loudly.
straighter?
Use your best Stephen voice and speak to the back of the room.
All right.
Yeah, thank you both. We can't hear you. It is a little subdued, but I'm sure we'll make it through it.
Yeah, please do tell me on this time if not coming through clearly.
Yeah, we'll have to see on that one. That one was a bit quiet, so we'll see what we can do on our end too. All right, well, as I said, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. It is the top of the hour, so I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. Please join me for a flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. At this time, I would like to ask everybody to join me in a moment of silence out of respect for those lost in our recent boating accident and their families. Our thoughts and prayers go out to them. Thank you. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Present.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Ms. Duncan, here. Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
Ms. Carlson,
Here.
and Mr. Yested is absent this evening.
Great, thank you. Are there any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? That'll bring us to special reports. Is anyone here for government to government this evening? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? School district? And any students and guests for special reports? Seeing none, that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening, my name is Richard Wien. This is going to be something a little different, even though there were major economic reports that came out. Today is June 13th, and this is an ode to a fishery and fishermen, or how it got this far is baffling. I believe in the rule of law, but as we all know, from history, that law can be distorted, perverted, and even manipulated. Sometimes it is necessary to stand for what is right. Sometimes you have to stand alone in your quest for justice, like Rosa Parks or Mahatma Gandhi, or even the saints who were martyred for their beliefs. What if, however, there are times when you can stand with others. What if Senators Murkowski, Sullivan, Stedman, Representatives Batola, and Hemschute, Governor Dunleavy and his legal staff, a state legislature resolution of support, a Sitka Assembly resolution for support, multiple organizations, especially the ATA, and fishermen across Alaska stand with you. Families and friends across Southeast, and this includes the seafood processors in Sitka. NOAA is even willing to revise the environmental analysis and therefore allow people to go fishing And there are so many more people who support you, meaning the Sitka fishery. We know, based on substantial evidence, the Wildlife Conservancy lawsuit is not about killer whales, yet they want a closure of the king fishery here. The closure affects our community and the well-being of our fishermen and their families, but ironically does not help the killer whales. And as we are close to the 4th of July, I think of the Declaration of Independence and our founding fathers and what it means. I think of the Declaration's words. When in the course of human events, sound familiar? It becomes necessary, and I've changed the words a little bit, for one people to go fishing. And these actions that cause the king closure require that we should declare the causes which impel them void, and on July 1st, 2023, that we go fishing as we have done for so many years. I do believe that it's come time and not to hold our fate to the Ninth Circuit, and that to go out and fish in the spirit of their revolution and follow the established rules, do everything you would normally do, and ultimately, as we say in New Jersey, what are they going to do about it? Everybody supports this, and there's no reason that we should allow this to continue and leave our fate to the tides. So on July 4th, think about it. Stand together, go fishing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. Oh. You can check that in the morning.
Check.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? Any item off of tonight's agenda?
Hello. Coming back to an issue from 6 weeks ago, the police chief not feeling comfortable raising the cab rates. I just had a few more questions for the assembly. Is it true Mr. Beatty charged Sitka $171,625 in 2021 for his services? If so, what is he charging Sitkans now for his services? And did the assembly approve him charging almost 170% more in his second year on the job? Or does Mr. Beatty give himself raises? Do Mr. Beatty's contracting services so far exceed services of other Sitkans that he deserves 4 to 5 times more than the median? For comparison, the award-winning police chief in Juneau was paid $169,908 in 2021. Juneau's population is about 4 times the size of Sitka's. What is the policy on nepotism in hiring in Sitka? Alaska State Code forbids it. Did he hire his daughter in the police department? Section 3990-0202, nepotism prohibited. It is unlawful for a person who is the spouse of or is related by blood within and including the second degree of kindred to the executive head of a principal state department or agency to be employed in the department or agency. Why is Mr. Beatty not bonded? Does he make financial decisions for the police department? Does he supervise employees? Is he authorized to arrest, detain, and use lethal force? Why is he not bonded against violation of law, embezzlement, misuse of funds, discrimination, abuse of authority? Mr. Beatty swore an oath of office, which by Sitka Code, civil law, which I give to the Secretary, is required of an officer of the municipality or a designated employee. Since he was required to take an oath according to Sitka Code, he is then either an officer of the municipality or an employee. Under Alaska State Code, Mr. Beatty is a public employee, since he is under the contract of hire. Mr. Beatty is handling public funds and has legally designated authority to arrest, fine, and use lethal force. Why is Mr. Beatty not bonded for faithful performance, for surety, Brian Hansen has twice refused to answer this question. Perhaps the Assembly can. I submit this codes and definitions to the Secretary.
Anyone else for persons to be heard? Any item not on tonight's agenda?
Good evening. My name is Lakota Harden, and I'm a grandmother living here in Sitka, a resident. I'm also on the Health Needs and Human Services Commission. And I just heard on KCAW, thankfully, they cover a lot of issues in the morning, and I heard that tonight Youth Advocate Services would be addressing you about the facility for the youth. And as a grandmother, as someone who was a teenager here, you know, in this town, I worry about our young people. I worry that they're not getting the kind of teachings, the kind of relationship, the kind of community support that we got when we were young. I grew up over on Teponsky, where everybody, by the time you got home, all the aunties and all the mothers knew what you did and where you were and who you stopped and talked to. You know, it really truly was a village that raised our community as children. And our young people don't have that anymore. And with all the many issues that they're facing, I'm really grateful that we have youth advocates here in our town to be thinking about them when many of us feel way too busy. There's young people out there disenfranchised, young people out there that don't have any resources. And I think that if we have the funding, if we have the people willing to do the work, then we as a city should help figure out a remedy. If something doesn't work, then let's push forward more and figure out what would work. And so I just want to say that as a community member, that I think it's really important, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel that way. It just, especially the teenagers, I think there's focus on little kids and then people succeeding at school and succeeding to be, you know, tax-paying citizens. But there's many of our young people that are lost and they need a hand. They need that buoy out there. And I think that this is what this will be, and I really want to emphatically state that we need to take care of them. If this isn't going to work, we need to figure something else out that will, and not leave anybody behind. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? I see none. That'll bring us to consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A, approve the minutes of the May 9th and May 23rd assembly meetings, and B, move to approve resolution 2023-22 on first and final reading, setting the millage rates for the fiscal year July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any public comment?
Is it working? This is Richard Lean. As far as the millage rate goes, and solidifying it, hopefully it'll be on the GIS very soon, all of these changes. But the assessment added $40 million to the overall value of Sitka real estate. At the end of the day, this is a increase in your taxes, because as you know, 1 mil is equal to $600 per $100,000 of value. There were 500 pieces of real estate, basically in the Sawmill Creek area, which were evaluated. So if you divide 500 into 40 million, that's $80,000 average increase in the property values. And I think that in this age, it will be very interesting to see if we have a downturn in property values, how quickly they will reassess to meet that need. What we hear is that property values have gone up. However, Sitka is a unique place, and I can tell you not all housing values have gone up or will go up. So, this is going to happen. 2% goes to general, and 4% of your millage rate goes to the schools. So keep these numbers in mind. It's interesting arithmetic, and we will hear about this more at a later date. Thank you.
Anyone else on the consent agenda? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A and B, Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mayor Eisenbeis.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0.
Item C, please.
I move to appoint Rachel Worthy to an unexpired term on the Health Needs and Human Services Commission and a 3-year term on the Library Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Rachel to 2 different commissions. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Ween. As I have always done so for all people who step up for civic duty, especially on boards and commissions, I'd like to thank Ms. Worthy for doing not only 1, but 2. She has been a resident of Sitka, I believe, for like 2 years, and I hope that she will stay here a very long time and that she will enjoy her stays within these commissions. Of note, she's currently taking a master's degree in policy, and hopefully her, I'll say, learning expertise will show within the Health Needs and Human Services as well as the library. Thank you.
Any other public comment on the appointment of Rachel? Assembly deliberation? I just want to say thank you for jumping on Health Needs and Human Services. They've had a hard time reaching quorum with their smaller amount of members right now. So hopefully they can continue to do the good work that they've done for many years to this community. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to appoint Ms. Worthy to the Health Needs and Human Services Commission and the Library Commission, Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item C.
Brings us to unfinished business, item D. Tonight the Assembly will be convening as the Board of Adjustment to hear an appeal filed by youth advocates on the Planning Commission's denial of a conditional use permit for a quasi-institutional group of residents at 3411 Halibut Point Road. We had some legal questions that the Board of Adjustment wanted to get answered at our last meeting, and decided to postpone it until we could get some further review. So we've had some time to do that. That was included in our packet and is available at the back of the room for anybody who might be interested. So tonight, yes, if we could have a motion to convene as the Board of Adjustment, please.
I move to convene as the Board of Adjustment.
Second. Sarah on the motion.
Okay, on the motion to convene as the Board of Adjustment, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0.
Great, thank you. We're now convened as a Board of Adjustment. Brian, do you have some procedural advice for us this evening as we go through this process?
Excuse me, I do have some procedural matters to address, as well as some comments on some other matters that I'd like to take a few minutes to deal with. First of all, before I'd like to address the issue of timeliness of this appeal. After the decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission was made, and after the application had been filed, there was at least one citizen and maybe more who complained that the application for the appeal was untimely. I investigated that matter and discovered that the planning staff had told YAS that they had until April 19th to file the appeal, which by their calculation was 14 days after the appeal had been filed, which was not technically correct. They used a working day calculation as opposed to a calendar calculation, and led and told YAS that they had the working day calculation amount of time in order to file their appeal. When I was asked to opine on whether or not that would, their appeal should be refused because of being untimely, my opinion was strongly made that on legal issues of estoppel and fairness, that you should not refuse the application. Estoppel meaning there was a detrimental reliance by YAS on a staff member's notice that the appeal was due when it was, and they were timely within that. It would be unfair then, and they would have detrimentally relied on that to then refuse the application for appeal after the fact. When this matter was sent out on other constitutional and Fair Housing Act issues to outside counsel, I had them also look into that issue, and they concurred with my opinion about whether or not we should allow the appeal to go forward as timely under these circumstances. So I really think that the timeliness issue is an easy decision. It would have been, if it would ever been challenged in court, YAS would have been successful under the circumstances that we found ourselves. Second issue I want to speak to is the idea that I should recuse myself in any matter and anything related to this case. And I've had at least one citizen, if not more, send an anonymous letter to me, and I've heard a couple emails to the same type of request. And what I would tell the assembly and tell the citizens is that there's absolutely no need for me to recuse myself in assisting the assembly on this matter in the Board of Adjustment. I am not a decision maker. I am not being asked to provide opinions as to what decisions should be made, nor am I in a position of influencing on making any of these decisions. I have not been contacted by any assembly member to discuss what my opinion is on these things. In fact, when the opinion related to the constitutional issues in the Fair Housing Act materialized, I immediately determined that that should be something that should be addressed by outside counsel, and that's exactly what I did. I contacted outside counsel, and then under no circumstances did I suggest what their opinion should be. In fact, I made it explicitly clear that what they were to do is find out what would be the judicial decision that their opinion would support. And that's exactly what happened. So I am not a proponent for any resolution here today. I'm not an opponent for any part of this, but I strongly believe that, even though my mother was involved with YAS during her lifetime for several decades, and I have a niece that's employed by YAS, that I can still provide the procedural advice that has no effect on the actual decision that will be made here today. The third thing I want to speak to is the issue of potential ex parte communications in this matter. I'd like to remind all the assembly members and in your role as Board of Adjustment that you're acting in a quasi-judicial capacity as the Board of Adjustment, and therefore are obligated not to have ex parte communications with citizens who are affected by this decision, or entities that are affected by your decision here tonight. That's not to say that just because somebody sent you an email or someone approached you, it's whether or not you communicated with them about it and would use any of that information learned outside of this public hearing in making your decision. If you have communicated with someone by email or otherwise outside of these proceedings, you should disclose that at this hearing tonight and let the chair, the mayor, decide whether or not that's a conflict that would make you not unable to participate in these proceedings. I understand that this is a highly controversial subject within our community, and as long as you didn't have those communications and you can still be fair in listening to the evidence and making your decision, you should be able to proceed. Finally, let's go directly to the hearing procedure. And I think, as you'll see in the outside counsel opinion outlines, is some code problems with the factors and the considerations that were assessed. And under those circumstances, I strongly recommend that you follow the code strictly while you're making your considerations. While you're doing so, after you hear the evidence presented by the community and after you've reviewed the evidence that is passed to you from the Planning and Zoning Commission, you'll have the opportunity to deliberate. And I understand that Amy Ainsley, the planning director, will be able to assist you in the process of directing you to the facts you decide that support the factors from the code to ultimately make your decision. And of important consideration here, because it appears that both sides of these issues are going to put your decision under great scrutiny, is that you make the appropriate findings. And the findings are in accordance with what the code lays out. And specific facts need to be pigeonholed or put into those 5 factors of findings. And again, Ms. Ainsley will assist you going through those when it's time to deliberate. So I'll be here to answer questions procedurally, and thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So tonight, as we go into this hearing, code does lay out a procedure that the Board of Adjustment will be following. First, there will be a staff presentation of no longer than 10 minutes. Second is the appellant's presentation, again, no longer than 10 minutes. Third, we will have the opportunity for testimony or comments by the public that are germane to the matter at hand, limited to 3 minutes per individual. Staff will be given the opportunity for a rebuttal, response, or clarifying statements. And then finally, the appellant will have the opportunity for a rebuttal, response, or clarifying statements. At that point, the Board of Adjustment will close the evidentiary portion and will deliberate on the matters before it. Is there any further questions from the Board of Adjustment for our attorney before we begin? Thank you. We'll go ahead and start with the staff presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to clarify and starting with the staff presentation, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what my role in this proceeding is. There's 3 unique perspectives that I hope to be able to represent and to shine light on, but I'm not here in a position of advocacy for any of the outcomes. I simply want to provide you with historic information of what has happened on this case so far, and if the Assembly has questions regarding the code, zoning code particularly, to be able to assist you with that. So again, my role is to be here as your staff member, and also to represent, how staff handled the case and the staff recommendation in this case when it went before the Planning Commission. I'm also here to represent the Planning Commission within what happened at the meeting, to help provide context or questions about what may or may not have happened at that initial hearing. And then there's also a third perspective, which is the majority decision that was made by the Planning Commission in this case. So again, this was a split decision, so differentiating between the Commission as a whole versus the majority decision made is also important here. I will try very hard to distinguish which of those perspectives I'm providing you information on. If ever unclear, please slow me down and ask for clarification. So just a short background on this case. This case was heard under Conditional Use Permit 2307, which was filed by Youth Advocates of Sitka for a quasi-institutional home at 3411 Elwood Point Road, which is located in one of our residential zones, the R1 zone. Quasi-institutional homes are a conditional use in our zoning code, which means that they require a conditional use permit to be granted to the planning commission. The specifics of the case, including the staff report, the minutes, the zoning information, I can kind of through this kind of section of the report. I'm happy to answer those questions. They're also provided in your packet as well, if you want to reference anything. The permit was denied again on a 3-2 decision, and the findings or basis for that denial in the case, just to make sure everyone kind of understands the wording there, was that the required findings for conditional use permits could not be made because the proposal would adversely affect the established character of the surrounding vicinity due to its incompatible use with the R1 zoning, and that the unified descent of the neighborhood indicated high potential for neighborhood disharmony, and that the disharmony would also impact the ability of the proposal to meet its stated purpose. And again, that was also the basis. These findings were also made on a 3-2 decision. So in their appeal, the appellants had kind of 5 primary tenets of why they disagreed with that decision. So just to kind of walk through and compare where the majority decision from the Planning Commission landed on those aspects. The first claim was that the proposal was inconsistent, or that the proposal was consistent with the comprehensive plan. They outlined several goals and objectives from the plan that sort of spoke to workforce development needs, housing needs, and encouraged development patterns. The majority decision did not make any basis or any claims about it, the proposals fit within the comprehensive plan. It wasn't really, that wasn't the basis of their decision. That wasn't one of the factors. The second was that the majority decision incorrectly assessed whether the use was compatible with the zoning and the character of the surrounding properties. So the primary basis in this case for the denial from the majority's perspective was the public testimony received, that the neighborhood there was quite a bit of public participation at the meeting, and there were folks from the neighborhood that came and spoke and kind of talked about the character of their neighborhood and how it would change with this use. And speaking directly to the third tenet of the appeal, was that the majority decision would incorrectly characterize public testimony on the proposal. You'll see in the findings that it states that the dissent was unanimous from the neighborhood or from those testified, but the appellant claims that there was about a 50-50 split between those who supported it versus opposed. I did note that there was a lot of testimony that came in for this item. Some of it was written ahead of time. Some of it came from individuals versus households. People sometimes testified in person as well as in writing. There was also sort of an informal petition that was circulated by some of the neighbors as well, and multiple household members signed onto that petition. And so calculating the exact numbers was a little bit difficult. I think it's fair to say that we did hear testimony both for and against the proposal at the meeting. The fourth tenet of the appeal states that the majority decision relied on public testimony that should not have been considered due to the nature of the comments. And again, those comments that we received regarding impacts to the neighborhood character were largely focused on safety, neighborhood character, and property values. There were a couple of comments regarding noise and potential disturbances, but I don't think that landed very clearly in either direction. It certainly didn't kind of come out in terms of the findings, but do want to note that there was some mention about potential noise impacts. But again, a lot of it was kind of focused more on safety and neighborhood character. The fifth and the last item there was about the concerns of the type of testimony that was received and considered, and whether or not that type of testimony was problematic under the Fair Housing Act or potentially constitutional provisions. Generally speaking, the role of the planning department, the planning staff, is to administer the Sitka General Code and to make decisions under it. We are not constitutional experts, we're not federal law experts. And I think that you have some good information that was provided by outside counsel that can help to speak to some of those issues a little bit more, and that's where I would certainly defer comments to, and I believe that Brian should be able to help if you have any questions about the information that came out in that opinion. There are three potential outcomes that I see coming from tonight. The first is to grant the appeal, which would also grant the permit. The second is to deny the appeal, which would also deny the permit, or to remand the proceedings or remand the issue to further proceedings. So that could either be to a future meeting of the Board of Adjustment with more information. It could be back to the Planning Commission. We do have that motion sheet that we provided for you that kind of walks through the potential outcomes and then appropriate motions to make if those are the desired outcomes of the body. That's everything I have for the staff presentation. Happy to take any initial questions from the board.
Are there any questions at this point for staff? Thank you. We'll move on to the appellant's presentation. Heather, I'm assuming. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Heather Murray. I'm the Executive Director of Youth Advocates of Sitka. Thanking the Assembly this evening for listening to our appeal to the decision made by the Planning Commission on April 5th, 2023 to deny our conditional use permit for the property located at 3411 Halbert Point Road. Thank you for allowing us to provide an overview of our Coastal Haven program and decisions why we think are supported in our favor. We'd also like to thank the Planning Department staff for their support and guidance through this process. Youth Advocates of Sitka proposed Coastal Haven program is funded by congressional appropriations in the amount of $2 million for the community of Sitka from Senator Lisa Murkowski. The appropriations are for purchasing a facility, hiring staff, and general operations. These appropriations will be spent in the community of Sitka. This program will house and provide residential treatment services for youth and young adults ages 16 to 21. who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, have substance abuse issues, mental health issues, they've been marginalized, disenfranchised, and also could be victims of human trafficking. All these factors put our youth at risk for human trafficking. Youth Advocates of Sitka is a licensed and regulated behavioral health agency bound by the State of Alaska Department of Health and Human Service policies, and we're accredited by CARP International. We are a professional agency with very experienced staff. We've been providing residential treatment for Alaska's youth since 1975. First, I'd like to point out how our Coastal Haven program addresses several needs identified in the Sitka Comprehensive Plan and how it positively affects Sitka. The proposed program is very consistent and compatible with the intent of the Comprehensive Plan's goals, objectives, and policies as follows. Workforce development and youth engagement is needed to create qualified workers with technical skills to meet the needs of the local economy. Providing housing options and cooperative programs for at-risk populations. Lack of transitional housing and a homeless shelter. And support light commercial and professional service development along Halibut Point Road. Youth Advocates of Sitka provided a comprehensive operational plan and provided mitigation to lessen any impacts of the proposed use, including hours of operation, number of persons, traffic volumes, parking plan, exterior signage, noise, and community appearance such as landscaping and fencing. Youth Advocates provided the burden of proof that the conditional use permit satisfied all the required findings in the Sitka General Code 22.3.160C. I also have, for the record, our music policy, our noise policy, and our residential policy. I could submit when I'm done here. The Planning Commission is obligated to make decisions based on planning and zoning issues as outlined in the Sitka General Code 22.24.10E1 criteria to be used in determining impacts of conditional uses. There's 13. None of these were used. Instead, the Planning Commission stated reason for denying our permit request didn't reference any of the enumerated criteria laid out in their general code, but instead stated these findings could not be made. The Commission then copied and pasted the language of their prior denial of the same permit request for a Dodge Circle property. The Commission stated, as Ms. Ainsley stated, the proposal would adversely affect the established character of the surrounding vicinity due to its incompatible use in R1 zoning and the unified descent of the neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. Just to summarize quickly, this statement is not within the scope of the Planning Commission zoning and planning authority, as it does not state how the proposal would affect the community character or how it is incompatible with residential zoning, given that this is a residential facility, and expressly states the decision was based on neighborhood disapproval, but not on zoning issues. Neighborhood disapproval and neighborhood disharmony are not planning or zoning criteria and should not have been used to deny a permit. Furthermore, there was not unified dissent of the neighborhood. In fact, the comments received were 50-50, 31 in support, 30 in oppositions. The supporters were seemingly disregarded. Instead of following the policies and procedures of the Sitka General Code, the Planning Commission instead used discriminatory language, fear-mongering, and stereotypical fears from public comments as the basis for their criteria to deny Yaz's permit application twice now. It is because of this the Planning Commission has now potentially violated the Fair Housing Act, as well as the 14th Amendment for Equal Protection Law, and possibly the Violence Against Women Act. The Fair Housing Act states that when enacting or applying zoning or land use laws, state and local governments may not act because of fears, prejudices, stereotypes, or unsubstantiated assumptions that community members may have about current or prospective residents because of the residence protector characteristics. Doing so violates the Act. The 14th Amendment for Equal Protection under the law states it is illegal to impose restrictions on housing, zoning, and permitting of housing because of alleged public safety concerns that are based on stereotypes about residents or anticipated residents' membership in a protected class, and the Violence Against Women Act provides housing protection for people applying for or living in units subsidized by the federal government who have experienced domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Also, those who are experiencing homelessness. Youth advocates of Sitka serve youth who are victims of child abuse, youth who are in foster care or who aged out of foster care, homeless youth, youth who are at risk for human trafficking, youth who are at risk for substance use, youth who have severe emotional disturbance, and youth who have developmental issues such as fetal alcohol syndrome or autism spectrum disorder. These youth are recognized under the State of Alaska Mental Health Trust beneficiaries. They're also considered disabled under the Individualized Education Plan in Section 504 of the United States Department of Education. All these youth are protected by the Violence Against Women Act. Additionally, 90% of the youth advocates of Sitka serves is Alaska Native. Additionally, the Coastal Haven is a group home and has protective status under the Fair Housing Act. The Sitka General Code for quasi-institutional home states that this shall not include dwellings intended for a setting for handicapped persons as defined by the Fair Housing Act. So requiring youth advocates of Sitka to apply for a conditional use permit in the first place is a violation of this. For time, the Planning Commission then chose to impose additional conditions on their permit that were not imposed on other applicants. During deliberation, the commission members requested the vote be postponed so that youth advocates could hold a town hall to address the concerns of the public and to canvass the neighborhood conducting outreach. They offered no date, no resolution, and no expectations for this town hall. Youth advocates of Sitka is not required or obligated to canvass the neighborhood. We're not required to conduct a town hall. So this additional condition is also a violation of the Fair Housing Act. We have provided an extensive operational plan. The permit was extensively vetted, reviewed, and approved by the planning department. We have already addressed all the same concerns from the public: perceived fears, stereotyping, concern for property value dropping, concerns for additional traffic. Sitka actually has the second highest home prices in the state. They are not declining as per the recently published Sitka Economic Trends. I also have a letter from Keller Williams, Baranoff Realty, that also corroborates the same. That could go on record. Concerns about increased traffic should be directed at the tour buses, not at Yaz. Additionally, despite that one individual believes no one in Sitka is required to get a permit to park in their own driveway, if Yaz is required to get a right-of-way encroachment permit from DOT, we will, because that's our own business. And I see I'm just about out of time, so in closing, youth advocates of Sitka believes the Planning Commission exceeded the scope of its authority by issuing a denial based on criteria that is not legal zoning and permitting criteria. The Planning Commission has potentially violated the Fair Housing Act, the 14th Amendment, the Violence Against Women Act, by unlawfully ratifying the biases of the neighborhood, many of which is discriminatory. Planning Commission has violated its own zoning ordinances, and requiring youth advocates of Sitka to apply for this permit is a violation for handicapped persons under the Fair Housing Act. With this, I'll submit my information to the clerk. And I would be open for any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the appellant at this point? Great, thank you for your.
One of the documents that was submitted by youth advocates of Sitka in March had a timeline, and I was just knowing that we have a couple of options, that this is sort of a timely, can I ask what has changed with respect to the timeline as far as their purchase, as far as the approval, or is that not appropriate?
Are you asking the appellant or the attorney?
I think I'm asking the attorney whether or not I should gauge this, because I did have a question, because there are a couple of options as far as how we proceed, but I'm just wondering time-wise as far as purchasing and those sort of decisions. I know that this has kind of set you back because we were here in May and then it got postponed, so I'm not sure how your timeline has changed based off of that document that was submitted in our packet for, I mean, it was in March.
You can ask questions of the appellant.
I think that would be my question, is with respect to the timeline.
Sure, Ms. Duncan. So our actual deadline is 3 years since November of 2022. So we have quite some time before the expiration of our funds. When we didn't get the Dodge Circle property back in January, we were supposed to close on January 6th. We regrouped. That's when we met Mr. Arnson, who offered his property to us. And we're trying to work with Mr. Arnson's timeline, which is towards the end of the summer, because he'd like to move to Coffin Cove and put his son in school in Craig in time for the 2023-24 school year. So we would like to have this resolved sooner than later. We are hoping this month, but we could push it to July. I think Mr. Arnson would like to get out of Sitka by the end of July.
Thank you for your presentation. At this point, we'll be opening up the floor to testimony or comments from the public germane to the matter, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Valerie Nelson for the record. It's interesting that we should follow the code, except when we shouldn't, Mr. Hanson. Sitka General Code is part of the law. You all swore to uphold when you took your oath of office. 22.30.2308, titled Appeals to the Assembly states, every appeal to the Assembly shall, underlined, be filed with the municipal clerk within 10 days of the date of the recommendation or decision of the matter being appealed. 21.08.190B goes on to state, shall is synonymous with will and is always mandatory and not discretionary. The word may is permissive. Nowhere in the code does it allow for staff error as justification for a late filed appeal, and I'm unable to find a provision in our code that allows for city staff to state otherwise. This is not a timely filed appeal, as the meeting took place on April 5th. The appeal letter that I see is dated April 19, 4 days past what our code allows, and should not be before you. I filed many administrative appeals, and I never got help from city staff saying, oh man, you can have 5 more days. We have a code that says the law is the law. In their appeal, YAS points to all the neighborhood people that do not wish to have the character of their residential neighborhood diminished or changed by the whims of a former city administrator, Keller Williams, Mr. Brady, that's trying to broker this lucrative deal. They also point to all the people that are in favor of this as being the same amount of those for as against. I did not find in the record any one of the people that spoke in favor of this conditional use permit as owning a residence in this neighborhood. They also state other uses, such as a bar and restaurant a half mile away that is on property that is commercially zoned, Channel Club, as well as a charter lodge and 2 short-term rentals, which more than likely went through the conditional use process. To justify an insertion of a quasi-institutional facility into a residential area, one of the most restrictive zones, there have been several commercially zoned properties on the market they could have purchased without inserting themselves into a residential neighborhood. Zoning is a game of expectations and predictability. An R1 classification gives everyone a common expectation that a house or duplex will go in next door. This predictability stabilizes our property values and gives the bank some assurance that the property will maintain its cash value. Any transition brings unpredictability and brings chaos. This is a direct quote from a previous Planning Commission meeting packet dated 2/5/1990. Also from the 11/20/89 meeting packet, Kramer Avenue, one of the underlying principles of zoning and subdivision regulations is the protection of property values. That's why the conditional use, variance, subdivision regulations are designed to protect landowners. I hope you understand you're not elected to cater to everything administration puts before you. Please do the lawful thing and deny this appeal. And I think YAS is probably a great organization, but I'm opposed. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi, my name is Greg Delannon, and I live at 3507 HPR, which is about 4 doors down from the proposed property. I would like to start by saying that I am opposed to having this decision be overturned, and I believe that the Planning Commission acted in good faith when they decided to deny the permit. I would like to start off by saying that I've been very disappointed and offended, honestly, by how this has gone. I was one of the people who did take a petition around to my neighbors. That we actually had over 40 names and individuals in the neighborhood who signed our petition in opposition. None of the comments that I heard from my neighbors and nothing written on the petition has anything to do with concerns about safety for the neighbors or anything that is discriminatory in any way. I have a background in public health. I'm a sociologist. I actually worked to start an adult mentorship program at McLaughlin Youth Center in Anchorage. I would definitely take offense with any discriminatory, biased comments that were made. This was not a not in my backyard issue. This had to do with the fact that this home does not have much privacy. As the applicant has stated, it's a very private area. It is actually not. There are dozens of homes that look directly down into the comings and goings of this home. It shares a beach with multiple homes as well. And so we had concerns about the privacy. We also had concerns about the fact that it's an hour-and-a-half walk from town for individuals and that they may not have cars. Many of them are going to be young adults because the program goes up to age 21. And they're expected to get rides, which I know as a mom is actually a long way back and forth to be spending in your car. So our concerns actually had to do with the ability for the residents to be successful and to have that turned on us and to be accused of being racist or that I'm making derogatory comments or that my neighbors are because we oppose this is honestly quite offensive, and I think it's the disharmony that the Planning Commission was pointing to. At no point has YAS reached out to any of the neighbors that I regularly speak with to talk to us about this issue. In fact, they have created much inflammatory, rude, and quite honestly offensive commentary and language about this that has made this seem as if we are against helping youth who I agree need help. This is actually about this house. It's not about YAS. It's about whether or not this house is a right place for this pilot statewide program. As YAS mentioned, they have almost 2 more years to find a more suitable location. I would highly encourage our community to come together to support YAS in doing that because this is not the right location for it. Thank you.
Good evening, Mary Magnuson for the record. And for the record, I am the purchaser of the property directly across the street from this home. It's an employee housing at this moment. They look right down through the windows. There's a lot of things to be said here. The first one is this appeal should not be being heard. There should have been a second filing of the CUP request, and the Planning Commission should have looked at it again. The appellant has produced no new evidence, which is what you need to see, is some evidence that this is not going to change the character of the neighborhood. It clearly is. I find the planning department's report extremely lacking. As a citizen, I'm able to produce 22 pages of police reports to the Hanson house in the last 10 years. 22 pages. I would venture to guess that in the neighborhood that I live in, there hasn't been 10. So this is at a 6-bed facility. This is a 12-bed facility plus workers. So not only are they asking to put this in a residential neighborhood, this business, they may be a nonprofit, it's still a business, it's still what it is, it's a group home, it's a business. Now it's double this, so we're looking at 44 pages in 10 years. How is this congruent with an R1 neighborhood to put a business that's going to have this amount of police call and disruptive to the elderly neighbors and people with little kids? And I agree with Britt. I am frankly offended. I work for YAS. I employ at-risk people, lots of them. And to be saying that we just don't want this facility is ridiculous. The grant was given to build a facility. There's been no safety policies, no evidence, nothing. The code says how many people should be in that building. I want you to follow the code. They want to follow the code, let's follow the code. I don't think it's going to be a viable thing if we actually do the numbers. I urge you to remand this to the Planning Commission for an appropriately phrased finding, which I believe will be a denial. Zoning is in place for a reason, and if you're going to just throw it out the window, what assurances does anybody have in their home, their value, and what they can expect in their neighborhood? I would urge you to remand this to back to planning, or just outright deny it. I think the attorney's report makes it clear that you can. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Roy Mitchell. I reside at 103 Darren Drive, and we too look down on the residents, current resident there, 4111 HPR. And I again, on behalf of my family, wish to go on record as opposing issuing the rezoning for a conditional use permit for the quasi institutional facility proposed by the Youth Advocacy Sitka. I wish to echo other feelings that have been expressed this evening, and that the advocacy group continues to disregard, totally disregard those of us living there, neighbors, making little or no effort to reach out to us, to deal with our issues and bring us into their support and trust to assist in making this happen. Very clearly, we agree, the family, that there is a need, but this proposal is inadequate. The approach continues to display, in my mind, fairly heavy-handed actions. We've been given no consideration, and the success of this, as I stated earlier, the success of a venture like this requires partnership and collaboration, and they have not considered thus their partners. Therefore, we, my family, we humbly urge this assembly to recognize and uphold the determinations made by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and again, deny the approval as is currently proposed by this organization. And this site is not adequate based on the proposal put forth. So thank you very much.
Hi, Tori O'Connell Kern. I didn't have prepared remarks, but I was listening to the radio and wanted to come down and support YAS and support this request. I sent a letter in earlier, and hopefully you all have read that, but I guess if we're talking about consideration, I think our first consideration should be for the children of this community. And this is a real need, a real outstanding need in our community. And it seems that this house is a good fit for this. The requirements for cover there. And we do a lot of things with residential neighborhoods, allowing charter fishermen, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, where we don't know the quality or character of the people there. I mean, here we have youth in need, and they are residents, they live here. Let's allow them in this house. I would say just a few more things. The privacy and, nobody wants anything to change, I get that. But I would say the beach is public. Anybody can use a beach on low tide. I have beachfront property, people can use my beach on low tide. That isn't a very compelling argument to withhold housing from children that are in need. The Hanson House, with all due respect, is a house for youth, at-risk youth with serious issues. That it's not apples and oranges there. So I think this is a perfect location for this house because, for one, the park is there. And I would just urge us to do the right thing as a community and move forward with this. Let's do it. Murkowski gave the money to the community. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
My name is Martina Kurzer. I have been a citizen of Sitka for almost 28 years and have been working for Sitkans Against Family Violence for over 17 years. I'm speaking for myself and not on behalf of my agency. I'm here to encourage you to override the decision of the Planning Commission of denying a conditional use permit for youth advocates of Sitka and to allow this agency to purchase property on 3411 Allen Point Road, with the goal to establish a home for youth in need. During my time at SAFE, I have learned a lot about Sitka. Before, I was part of a mostly white, educated, and financially stable crowd. Working at SAFE opened my eyes to the unseen fellow citizens, among them the homeless, the victimized, the unfortunate, and the forgotten. Our agency saw dramatic changes from shifts in our policies. One was the transition of trauma-informed services. In short, this means that instead of asking a person with unusual behavior, what is wrong with you, we ask, what happened to you? This small shift of perspective made me much less prejudiced and opinionated and way more compassionate. It changed my interactions with clients to a level where I meet them on their terms, instead of expecting they should interact with me on my level. I request that particularly the neighbors of 3411 HBR also make this slight shift of perspective. The shelter at SAFE is located in a residential downtown area. I went online and checked the assessed property values of our direct neighbors and the ones adjacent to them, the first and second circle around SAFE, so to speak. I did not detect any evidence that the directly surrounding properties are showing lower values than others. Reading YAS's appeal, it becomes obvious to me that the Planning Commission's decision to decline granting a conditional use permit was based mostly on fear and bias of direct neighbors. As a community, we have always been proud of our sense of helping fellow citizens in need, like in cases of accidents, disease, natural disasters, or on the water. There's almost no day without a Facebook post about a dog that seems to be lost. So evidently, people do care. I'm disturbed that this sense of care ends when we consider caring for youth and young adults whose life stories do not reflect our own or that of our own children. Please allow youth advocates of Sitka to purchase this property. Please make sure that young people who have been treated badly in the past will receive a home and healing. Thank you.
assembly members, mayor, staff. My name is Eric Jordan, and I actually came here to speak on another issue, maybe later. But as a long-time advocate for youth, and a coach for many years, served on daycare board, teen center board, city council, alcoholism and drug abuse boards, taught middle school, broadcast many basketball games. I've been an advocate for youth my whole life. Now I'm taking young people of all ages fishing. I have friends on both sides of this issue. I listen to them. But a lot of time these young people don't have anybody standing up for them. I mean, they can't really speak for themselves. But there's a lot of troubled young people. And so my position is sometimes it's really hard to make these type of decisions, and I appreciate you so much. But I stand for the youth, and I hope you will too.
My name is Kathy Newman, and I would like to request that you vote yes for their conditional use permit. Without some kind of intervention, youth and young adults who are homeless, marginalized, lacking caring adults, or risk of being trafficked are much less likely to become productive adults. The YIS proposal for helping these youth and using this facility is well planned and very detailed. It, along with their trained and caring workers, would provide the structure and discipline the youth need to give them both hope and direction for the future. The circumstances that cause them to be in this situation are often not their fault, and they deserve a chance to realize their value as individuals and to be part of making Sitka a better place.
Hi. Card question. I'd like to say that while I respect the Planning Commission that wanted to take neighbors' concerns into account when making this zoning choice, many of the concerns expressed about increased criminal activity and law enforcement presence at the proposed facility imply that youth who are victims of crimes are by default dangerous and don't have a place in our community. I work as an educator at Sitka Science Center, and while I'm representing only my own opinion, my work with youth in Sitka directly informs my support for YIS's proposed housing project. Young people struggle to focus in school, build healthy relationships with peers, or be consistent employees when their housing situation is unstable. Past trauma and lack of community support only exacerbate these issues. In Sitka, where our housing and rental market are already excessively tight, it's even more imperative to create and support safe housing spaces for youth. I worked in Bend a couple of years ago for an AmeriCorps program, and Bend is another place that has incredibly tight housing. And the youth that I worked with were young people, same age category, mid-teens to mid-20s. And the biggest, most consistent problem we saw with people showing up for work and being able to learn and grow and become productive young adults, people that had skills and had like a future, was housing. That was the biggest thing. And I really would hate, I hate to hear and see that that is also a problem here. I urge you to grant youth advocates conditional use permit for this facility. Young people in Sitka can't learn and thrive without safe, stable housing and connection and support to our community. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. I'm Carolyn Black, and I live within 100 yards of the proposed site of the YAS quasi-institutional home. The planning committee was correct in voting to deny the permit to use the 3411 Hallow Point Road as a quasi-institutional home in a residential neighborhood. It would most definitely adversely affect the established character of the surrounding vicinity in our neighborhood. Heather Murray stated in her filed paperwork that efforts were made to speak with some of the neighbors. However, we were never contacted and lived across the street and only one house is between us and the proposed property. She also stated in her appeal to the Assembly, Youth Advocates of Sitka is not required or obligated to canvass the neighborhood. But in the permitting paperwork, they stated, YAS will foster relationships with the neighbors so that everyone is satisfied with the program and allow for discussion if there is an incident. This is already starting off on a wrong foot with half-truths and lies. I also researched the appropriations information on Senator Murkowski's website, and this is word for word what is written. Sitka, $2 million to the Youth Advocates of Sitka to build a facility to support victims of trafficking, exploitation, and substance abuse. Not buy a home and try to make it fit into what they need to build one. I come from a family of 14, my parents and my 12 siblings, of which I am the youngest. I can tell you from experience, it was not easy, and we were all from the same family living in an 8-bedroom home of varying ages. Building an appropriate facility within a commercial area of Sitka will be a more appropriate and successful venture, and I believe the intent of the appropriations money from Senator Murkowski. I ask that you to vote to deny with prejudice this appeal.
So I spent a few years working in group foster homes. And
You can state your name for the record.
I'm sorry, I'm Wendy Leverett. So I did spend time working in group foster homes in neighborhoods in another state, and there were understandably a lot of concerns, and I get why people are nervous. There are a lot of unknowns welcoming something like this into your own backyard, so to speak. But there are a few things. One is having those youth in neighborhoods. We were able to deinstitutionalize them, their children, their youth. These kids have been hurt. These kids, these young people have been through more than we understand, and it wasn't their fault. The only hope they have of having a healthy, normal life is to be in a regular neighborhood and feel like regular people and learn what healthy is and what it looks like and what they could have. Being institutionalized is absolutely the opposite of what will help these kids have a future. So I understand the concerns, but often they're not as bad as people think. The fear is normal and it's understandable, but the neighborhoods I worked in, the issues were never as bad as they thought. And yes, police come sometimes, but they never had it. It wasn't the inconvenience they thought it would be. And I mean no disrespect to the people in that neighborhood. I don't understand the concern about people being able to see the yard. I lived on Darren Drive myself, and I understand that. But the reality is they're going to be more uncomfortable, the fact that they're more on display because they're not hiding. They're going to be in a structured home with people who've done this for years. And there might be bumps in the road, but they're going to figure out how to make it work for that home, for those kids. With all the fears that are real and all the concerns that are legitimate, at the end of the day, no one's going to want these kids in their neighborhood because the same fears are going to be everywhere. But these children deserve a future. And if we're not willing to give them a home and show them what they could possibly have, they have no future. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Jensen. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a background as an educator, all ages, and also I have worked at Youth Advocates. I worked at the Hanson House for a year or two. I don't remember what it was. I just appreciate your concern about this, and I hope we're all equally concerned about youth in our community. I just want to address one of the things that was said earlier was that people haven't said that they were afraid, but I was at the planning commission meeting, I was at the last assembly meeting where this appeal came up. That was a majority of comments that people made. They were afraid of what this was going to do. They were afraid for their kids. And I just think that their concerns are overboard, personally. And I think that there have been a lot of input into this. I think there are a lot of legal issues raised. I think Brian, you know, I don't know if he's going to address those later, but a lot of things about Fair Housing Act and all that, but I don't know if those need to be addressed. But one of the words that's really stuck out to me with all this is called a conditional use permit. It was granted.
Good evening, my name is Richard Ween. This is a very interesting issue. I'm a process guy. I like process, I like detail. Some of the issues related here, I hope people read and including people in the audience, read the Gotti consultation on this matter. And the bottom line is, this is something that has been handled not very well from the very beginning. I have a couple of notes here that one, obtaining fairness in a hearing is a cornerstone of justice. In order for a hearing to be fair and comply with due process requirements, it must be held before an impartial tribunal. This assembly is acting as the Board of Adjustment, is the governing body of the City and Borough of Sitka. With just a minimal amount of due diligence, one sees displayed on the website of Youth Advocates that the City and Borough of Sitka is listed as a partner of YAS. To me, this partnership means that CBS agrees with the mission and purpose of YAS, and its ability to adjudicate the YAS appeal is tainted. I therefore recommend that the board adjourn and remand back to the Planning Commission, which was suggested by the consultation, and to develop its case as suggested by the Gotti legal opinion, and when complete, send the findings to an independent arbitration board for decision. On the other hand, when you deal with the equitable estoppel, this actually should not have been granted if it can be demonstrated that YAS had knowledge of the deadline and failed to meet it. Failure to meet a deadline is not the issue that is presented in the case presented by Gotti, Municipality of Anchorage versus Schneider. That had to do with a promise in a zoning change. It had nothing to do with deadline. When you start changing deadlines, I think you're approaching a very bad zone. The legal opinion, by the way, represented by Gotti, I'm afraid to say, in my humble opinion, I found was very weak and actually seemed more like a defense for YAS than a defense for the Planning Committee. Also, this will make R1 weaker. And I agree with prior speakers that zoning does have reasons. And this is a high-end real estate property which will be removed from the tax base. And in general, institutional owners will not care for the property, as well as a multi-millionaire individual who owns it. There is so much here to talk about. 3 minutes is not enough. Read the consult from Gotti.
Is there anyone else this evening to speak for or against the appeal?
Hi, my name is Mary Todd Anderson. I've been a Sitka resident for 53 years. We went through the same process, so I've been an educator for many years, a social worker, worked with hard to handle youth, good youth too, of course. Nobody's here arguing about the needs of the youth. All of us agree. I agree too. But I will say that, first of all, I oppose the granting of the conditional use permit. And also the fact that, the Women's Club letter that came out that I'm a part of, I never got to see that verbiage that said we were all unanimously in agreement with the conditional use permit. I never saw that letter. I thought it was a little bit very not fair to do that. So anyway, I oppose that. But why have a planning commission if we're not going to acknowledge the needs, the philosophy, of granting the neighborhood? And I will say, as far as Dodge Circle goes, we went through this whole process. I'm the one who went around to get the petition and everything else. There were a lot of concerns. Of course, we had a private driveway with runners that went down to that site. But in all honesty, there's been a lot of, I don't know how to say it, but not very kind comments from this agency. And believe me, I support youth advocates for a lot of programs, but it's never been done right from the beginning. They hardly contacted any of us, and I hear the same complaints for that. And so going back to I'm not sure with this pilot program if they are the ones, and this is gutsy to say this, and I'm going to say it, I'm not sure they're the ones qualified to do this program. I've been involved with a lot of administrative things with social work programs because of the unprofessional comments made. And there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of backstabbing, and if I wasn't home that weekend, it would have never happened. If somebody didn't walk off an airplane and see somebody that said their house was involved with that, it wouldn't have happened to even oppose it. So there's many, many issues going on, and they're talking about maybe employees living there. Yes, I realize they need some on-site 24-hour, but just back to the other, none of us are opposed, the youth. None of us supporting them. I just think with the time period, with the R1, this does dilute the process of R1. I totally agree with that. And I just think that, again, why have a planning commission? They did the right decision with us. Why not make the right decision with this neighborhood? And again, I have nothing against youth. I love youth. I adore youth. Thank you.
My name is Amanda Johnson, and I'm here in opposition of the appeal. I was also in opposition of the original request. I would just like to also reiterate the fact that, as far as I've heard, no one in opposition of this is in opposition of helping youth and what YAS is trying to do here. The opposition is specifically against this location and the fact that it is as far out HPR as it is. I agree that some of their plans do fall in line with the comprehensive plan, but they also go, they help make things worse, including the struggles that our police department has. And if you look at the police report that Mary supplied, those 20 pages of calls, each one of those indicated a time where a policeman drove to that address, took the time to go out there, which takes a lot of time. And I have lived in Sitka for almost 36 years. I have lived on this stretch of road for those 36 years. I know how it feels to walk into town. I know what it feels like being a kid stuck at the end of the road, taking the bus home and having issues and not being able to get a hold of anybody. You are a long ways out the road. They have stated that they will run this with a minimum ratio of 1 to 5 for staff and clients, which to me a minimum ratio is a risk for a staffing crisis. I also work in healthcare, and I see struggles on a daily basis of maintaining full staffing, especially in behavioral health and in our rural remote areas. At the commission meeting, they also discussed getting employees here and where they would be housed, and they did mention the possibility of housing employees at this residence, which to me is an abuse of what this funding is for. I'd also like to speak to the concerns about safety. It's not just the safety of myself and my family, it is concerns about the safety for the clients at this residence. Being protected, being able to get to and from town, and their privacy at this residence. It's not so much the neighbor's privacy is the concern, it's the fact that when they're sharing that beach, when they're in the house, they're in a fishbowl. So I urge you to uphold what the commission decided, because they did follow code and it just happened to be the same reason that it was denied on Dodge Circuit. Thanks.
Rachel Jones, offering comment in support of MAS. I submitted most of my comments via writing on some of the fair housing, civil rights, legal issues, and you guys have those all in writing. I just wanted to reiterate that, as much as we're hearing things about what the neighborhood desires, what's best for the youth in Sitka, this issue in front of you guys today as a quasi-judicial body is an area of law that's housing rights law, and it's very well established. It's regulated by the FHA, it's regulated by the ADA, it's regulated by the Civil Rights Act, it's regulated by the Violence Against Women Act, where you're talking about victims of sexual abuse or domestic violence. And you've had outside counsel provide you some kind of thorough information on that. I just want to reiterate that whatever the zoning code says, whatever the state law says, federal law preempts where there are issues of discrimination and housing rights. I think your council has provided you some thorough information on that front. I also wanted to say, because I submitted it by written comment yesterday, I didn't know previously that the money that is being framed as coming from Senator Murkowski, of course, is not from her personally. It was brought to my attention that it comes from HUD, it comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I didn't know this previously, or I would have submitted it with my earlier comment, and I did so in writing yesterday, that Housing and Urban Development has an enforcement arm for housing discrimination as well. So your council laid out, if YS was not satisfied that any discrimination had been remedied at this hearing, they could appeal to the Superior Court. That's one option. They could appeal within the city system, but they could appeal for a federal investigation through HUD as well. They have an enforcement office that investigates housing discrimination claims. I submitted that yesterday. It was pretty short notice, but I want to bring that to your attention as well. And then just speaking as a private citizen who's lived near a youth advocate's house. They ran a house for middle school age children on my street. It's like an 11-foot wide alley. Just want to say we didn't notice any issues. They were there for a number of years. Our kids played with the kids that were at that house. They were well supervised. The program was well run. Our property value doubled over that time, so I don't think it had any impact on our property value at all. As far as police showing up at the property, whatever the actual number was, I don't know, but living across the street, I noticed the police at the property twice. There was never any sirens, never any disturbance. And in the same amount of time, I actually had a neighbor call the police on us twice, once because they didn't like where we placed a fence post, and once because one of our chickens got loose. Which are, the kinds of things that happen in a small, tight neighborhood. And that particular house, I don't think, caused any more disturbances than my fence or my chicken did. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Stevens. I just want to go on record supporting this location for the program as explained to us. I think it's very well covered and planned. The money is there. The house is beautiful. I've been there and looked at it. It's perfect for normalizing a population of students that have been mistreated. And I know there's a lot of fear, and I've heard it too, because I've been coming to these meetings. And but I think we need to get past that. Our youth are under attack, and it's different than what it used to be. I'm a retired teacher. I taught kindergarten, been retired 13 years. In my last year of teaching, my kids are coming in with therapists, and I saw the decline, and now we're in a critical situation with our youth, and we need to step up. We need to set aside the fears and just, we got the money, we got the place. This owner of this place, I'm sure he wasn't being intentionally had a vendetta against his neighbors. He was a good guy, and he sees the need too, and we just need to get past our fears and do the same. Thank you.
Here mentioned how where she lived right near a place similar. They didn't have any issues there. Well, obviously that was run well. I don't think youth advocates of Sitka is doing as good a job. I mostly work from home. My wife is home most mornings and early afternoons. Although I did receive an 11th hour letter in the mail, nobody ever attempted to contact us nor any of our neighbors we have spoken with. I'll say it right now, I don't trust youth advocates of Sitka. I was at the April 5th Planning Commission meeting. My impression was half of their comments were spun to say that what they felt the commission members and the public wanted to hear. Youth advocates of Sitka stated that cameras, alarm systems, and fencing would be installed. All necessary precautions will be taken. All is a bold statement. All necessary precautions will be taken, but never once was that detailed out. What are these precautions? All is just a buzzword. Sounds good. Kind of went against when they turned in for their appeal. I kind of took part of their appeal bit by bit. And this one was kind of laughable. It says on page 3, bullet point 2 of the YAS appeal, if this wasn't such an important topic for me, the YAS spin is almost laughable. They comment on how 31 people were in support of this CUP, 17 being represented by one letter, but the signature of 5 people in one household were 3 children under 18. Well, these 5 they are talking about are Jeff and Tammy Wheeler and their 3 adult children, all of legal voting age. But they're saying, oh, they shouldn't be counted. But one letter representing 17 people, which we just found out, Mary Todd Anderson was not in favor of that letter, but her name was on there. So who is spinning what? Once again, I don't trust their leadership. So what's going to make this place is going to be safe? Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. They keep saying these youth, these children. These aren't children. These are 16 to 21-year-old young adults. You know, they're a little more harder to control than these children would be to have at Hanson House. Maybe I'm being a little overzealous here, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be they're tougher to control. They're a little smarter, a little older, a little wiser. They know a lot more. Anyways, I'm running out of time real quick here. Never mind around. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Any other comments this evening for or against the appeal? Sarah, please. Sarah, I understand we have one person on the line. Thank you.
My name is Heather Chandler. I work at YS. I'm speaking on my own personal opinion about it as well. I've worked previously as a domestic violence and sexual assault advocate, and before that with Edgecombe students. And so I've been working with the youth for nearly a decade. That being said, I've had a lot of experience with different varieties of youth in Alaska, them being from the village and from here in Sitka to all over the state of Alaska. And I see this opportunity as an an investment to our youth to be able to give them, not control them, but give them the skills that they need, which we do already at YS, to be able to obtain employment, use coping skills, to be a part of the community and become citizens. And we have had lots of successful rates. I believe in youth, and this is a great opportunity, because for once in our lifetime we are able to identify trauma, which has never been brought up in the past, and old beliefs, old systems, including school beliefs, and we have the skill set to help those with historical trauma, generational trauma, to be able to pave a future for these kids, and to have them go out into the world and become adult citizens. And yes, they are kids, to become adult citizens, law-abiding citizens, taxpayers, and they are our future. And our future is important. It's an investment in our future. And I love YS, I love what they do. And I think this is a great opportunity for Sitka to grow and support youth statewide.
Sarah, if we can get the telephonic participation on the line, please.
John, I might need help with the volume because my volume's not working on this side. Hello. Hi, Heather. This is Sarah calling from the assembly meeting. It's your opportunity to provide public comment on the appeal. So if you could state your first and last name for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Okay. Right now?
Yes.
Is there any way you could call back? I'm on the interstate.
No, I'm sorry. This is your opportunity for public testimony. Did you want to offer your public testimony?
Yeah.
Heather, thank you for your time. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Heather Brandt. I am in opposition of this permit. I want to start off by saying the code says for quasi-institutional housing in an R1 zone, the amount of people allowed in a home is 6 people. And YS is wanting to put 8 on one side and 4 on the other. That is against the code. And if we're going to follow code, why are we not going to follow that one? From where our home is positioned, from my children's bedroom, they can see down. Even if they were to add fencing, add privacy, my children see down into that home and into the yard. And as I am concerned for my kids, I'm also concerned for the privacy of the people that would be living there. And I just want to say, I was really disappointed when YS declined the opportunity for a town hall or neighborhood discussion, because I feel like this would have been a great opportunity for them to educate the community and have an open communication with our neighborhood. But instead, they just said that they had spoken to who they needed to talk to, and the rest of us were squeaky wheels. In YS's application, they said that they have no issues with their other programs, and after speaking directly to people who live around Hanson House and reviewing police records, we know that that is not totally true. It's discouraging that YS couldn't just be honest in their application and state that sometimes they do have issues that arise that they work with the police department and neighbors to make sure those issues are resolved. In their application, they stated they would work with the surrounding neighbors so that everyone is satisfied with their program. And now they're saying that they don't need to discuss anything with neighbors. There are so many inconsistencies with YS and how they run the program. These inconsistencies are giant red flags to anyone who lives in the vicinity of 3411, should their permit be granted. It seems that they would like to appear great on paper, but they can't actually execute that in reality. Due to their lack of having actual plans in place, although they were ready to provide it today, they have not been in the past. It likely seems that YS would bring added noise, added traffic, and similar to Hanson House, added police traffic. And while we're not concerned about the police traffic, we're concerned about the resource. This summer, Sitka PD will be down to only 6 officers and no one in dispatch, really. So let's strain an already strained resource to our community. And that's all I have. I'm opposed. I respectfully ask you to oppose this permit.
Thank you for your time this evening, Heather.
Thank you.
And one last call for any testimony or comments for or against, please.
Hi, my name is Brendan Jones. The window of my kids actually does look down, or did look down, to the house, the previous house. And I'd just like to tell a little story about a kiddo who wasn't age 16 to 21. I think he was probably about 10 or 11. And he kind of looked back up at our kids and at first kind of stayed within the fence and kind of called out. And then my kids kind of started playing with them. They developed a relationship, and soon enough he was coming over in our yard kicking the ball. And I just want to harken back to the comment that was made previously that really struck me about these kids getting the chance or the avenue to become citizens in our community. They've obviously gone through significant trauma. I do think it's our job as a community to help them become citizens, and that's certainly the path that this kiddo who lived directly across that 11-foot alley, that's what was happening with him. So that's a story that actually happened. That's not anybody's imagination. Thank you.
Anyone else for testimony or comments this evening?
Hi, my name is Morgan Carlson. I work for YS, but this is me talking as a private citizen who lives by Hanson House. I've never noticed the police disturbances at all in the neighborhood. I know I've heard like parking might be an issue on our street. Hanson House is not the parking problem. There's no kids just hanging out in the front where their privacy would be at risk for the rest of the neighborhood, and they're not invading any of our privacy on the street. So I know people are worried about it, but it's not anything that I've noticed being next to Hanson House. So I don't see that changing with a more mature group of people. These are 16 to mid-20s kids that are young adults that arguably are going to be more mature, more invested in their own well-being in society, and I don't think risking an opportunity to get the help is something that they would do. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean. It didn't work. Here we go. My name is Shauna Thornton, and I sit on the board. I'm not here as a board member right at the moment. I do work at the bank, and I am not voicing the opinion of the bank I work at. This is my own personal experience from 30 years of volunteering with children in various communities across the state of Alaska. I volunteered and worked at the Boys and Girls Club in Kenai for over 20 years before I moved to Sitka. One of the things that I noticed is my kids always went to the Boys and Girls Club. There were all kinds of kids from all kinds of places.
There were some that were more disruptive, and there were some that were probably more quiet than others. But the one thing that was a commonality across all of the children in all of the years I've been a volunteer is that they're going to give you the behavior that you come to expect from them. So if you expect them to be marginalized, disenfranchised, not part of your community, that's what you're going to get. I have personally interacted with each of the kids at Youth Advocates. They're very wonderful children. We took them, they volunteered to go get the ducks, the rubber ducks out of the storage shed for the rubber duck race one year. And you know, those kids were so happy to be included in our community and to be given an opportunity to volunteer and to be shown what it's like to be a part of something. I have kids that now are in their 40s with their own kids, and they have reached out to me for various, social media or whatever. And the one thing that's a common thread is that there's nothing like a 13, 14, 20-year-old young man coming up and saying, Ms. Shauna, you made a difference in my life. You can't, that's what we're here for. That's what we're supposed to be. We need to be mentors in our communities, not marginalizers. And I would beg everybody to at least volunteer before having that chance of just saying it's a fearful thing. Because they're not fearful, they're just young people. But
anyone else for testimony or comments? Thank you all. I appreciate your comments this evening. We will be moving on to response or clarifying statements from staff. After we have these two clarifying statements and the evidentiary period is closed. So staff, Amy, if you'd like to offer a response or clarifying comments.
I don't have anything somewhere. I just wanted to make myself available for any questions that the board may have after testimony.
Thank you. Heather, an appellant response or clarifying statement, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Assembly. Again, Heather Murray, Executive Director for Youth Advocates of Sitka. YAS has been transparent through this whole process. We've provided extensive operational plans multiple times. We also have 50 years of experience with residential treatment for youth. We've submitted our appeal in the exact time frame that the planning department staff set forth. Yes, and set the time frame. Youth Advocates is a good resource for youth struggling in Sitka. Our community's at-risk youth population is at a much higher percentage than most expect. The Assembly can do the right thing by approving this conditional use permit to conform with the law. In the event our permit is not approved, YAS will move forward with filing housing discrimination to HUD for both properties, HPR and Dodge Circle, because it has indicated a pattern with the Planning Commission. Finally, Youth Advocates is going on record to request a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act for the protected class of disabled persons and land use and zoning policies and procedures where such accommodations may be necessary to afford persons or groups of persons with disabilities the equal opportunity to use and enjoy housing like everyone else. The city cannot limit group homes for persons with mental illness to certain neighborhoods. It is illegal under the Fair Housing Act for local land use and zoning laws to exclude or limit group homes for individuals with specific types of disabilities. I submit this reasonable accommodation request to the clerk. To address the transportation issues, once again, it's also laid out in our extensive operational plans. Yes, has vehicles. All of our youth take the school bus, just like everyone else in the town. We also provide over 3,500 rides a year to our youth using our fleet of vehicles. No one needs to worry about how our youth move up and down HPR. Our youth get to school, our youth get to work. They also take the bus, the community ride. So there's a lot of things that people have said, it's really none of their business. Also, it's been extensively laid out in our operational plan, which we've submitted, I believe, about 5 times now. Also, when we hear people who say some of this derogatory language and then they come back up here and say it again, but then they also say that they didn't say it, it just shows that the record has taken some of this discriminatory language in account for denying our permit. Yaz is a good neighbor. We will show everyone we are a good neighbor, and if you give us a permit, we will prove you all wrong. Thank you.
At this time, I will close the evidentiary portion of this hearing, and the Assembly will have the Board of Adjustment will have the opportunity to deliberate. Before we do so, I'd like to take a 8-minute recess so that the Board of Adjustment can use the bathroom and come back. Sarah, at that time, could you pass out the newly acquired information that we received earlier? Is there enough copies for all of us?
I will look into that.